The shadow on the asphalt Elias Thorne was a man of logic. As a night shift courier in the heart of Chicago, his world was defined by GPS coordinates, city grids, and the hum of his tires against the pavement. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in deadlines. But the streets of America have a way of holding onto the past. Some neighborhoods aren't just collections of buildings. They are containers for memories that refuse to stay buried. It was October 30th, 2025, at exactly 3:14 a.m. Elias was driving through a desolate stretch of the South Side, an area where the streetlights flickered with a rhythmic, heartbeat-like pulse. The fog was so thick it felt like driving through wet wool. The hitchhiker of the mist, as he turned onto 44th Street, his headlights caught a figure standing near a rusted fire hydrant. It was a young woman wearing a vintage yellow sundress, completely out of place for a freezing Chicago autumn. Elias pulled over. "Hey, you need a ride. It's freezing out here." The woman didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead into the darkness. "I just want to go home," she whispered. Her voice sounded like dry leaves skittering across a sidewalk. "Where's home?" Elias asked, unlocking the door. "The end of the line," she replied. As she sat in the passenger seat, the temperature inside the van plummeted. The heater, which had been blasting at 75 degrees F, suddenly began blowing ice-cold air. Elias noticed something terrifying in the rearview mirror. The seat appeared empty. When he turned his head, she was there. When he looked in the mirror, there was only the cracked leather of the headrest. The vanishing district Elias began to drive. He tried to make small talk, but the woman remained silent, her hands folded neatly in her lap. He noticed her skin wasn't just pale, it was translucent, showing thin, gray veins like a marble statue. "I've lived here all my life," Elias said, his voice trembling. "I've never seen that dress style around here." "My father bought it for me," she said softly, "for the dance. The night the fire took the block." Elias froze. He remembered the history books. In 1924, a massive fire had leveled this exact district, trapping dozens of people in a basement club. He looked at the GPS. The blue line was spinning in circles. The map showed they were driving through an open field. But outside the window, Elias saw towering, blackened ruins of buildings that hadn't existed for 100 years. The streetlights turned from electric LED to hissing gas lamps. "The transformation. Stop here," she commanded. They were in front of a vacant lot overgrown with weeds and surrounded by a chain-link fence. "There's nothing here," Elias said, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The woman finally turned to face him. Her eyes weren't eyes anymore. They were pits of swirling ash and orange embers. "There is everything here," she hissed. The smell of burning wood and ozone filled the van. The leather seats began to smoke. Elias tried to scream, but his throat felt like it was filled with soot. He watched in horror as the woman's yellow dress turned black, charring before his eyes, falling away into flakes of carbon. The escape from the past, Elias threw the van into reverse. He slammed on the accelerator, the tires screaming against the asphalt. He didn't look back until he reached the bright neon lights of a 24-hour gas station 3 miles away. He jumped out of the van, gasping for air. His lungs burned. A police officer, sipping coffee by his cruiser, walked over. "Whoa, son, slow down. You look like you've seen the devil himself." "The girl, 44th Street, the fire," Elias choked out. The officer's expression went cold. He set his coffee on the hood of the car. "You saw her too, huh? The girl in yellow. You know about her. Every few years, someone comes flying out of that fog," the officer said, looking toward the dark horizon. "That lot has been empty since 24. But every once in a while, the street remembers. You're lucky, kid." Usually, when she asks for a ride, the driver is never found. Only the car remains, smelling like smoke and filled with ash. The mark of the ghost. Elias went home and slept for 14 hours. When he woke up, he thought it was all a vivid nightmare brought on by exhaustion and the Chicago fog. He walked out to his van to start his shift. He opened the passenger door, expecting to see nothing. On the seat lay a single, charred piece of a yellow fabric, and etched into the glass of the window from the inside were the faint, soot-stained prints of a woman's hand. Elias Thorne quit his job that day. He moved to the desert, far away from the fog, far away from the shadows. But every time he smells a distant campfire or sees a flicker of a yellow light, he feels the phantom chill of 44th Street. In America, the roads are long, the cities are old, and some passengers never truly leave the vehicle. Elias moved to the dry, sun-scorched plains of Arizona, thinking the heat would melt away the memories of that freezing Chicago night. He took a job at a remote observatory, miles away from any city grid or haunted alleyway. He wanted silence. He wanted light. But 3 months into his new life, the silence began to change. It started with the radio. He was driving his truck across the Mojave at dusk when the local station, a classic rock channel, dissolved into static. Through the white noise, a rhythmic tapping emerged. Tap, 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 tap. It was the exact rhythm of the girl's fingers against the dashboard of his van in Chicago. The desert mirage. He pulled over, his breath hitching. The desert air was 105 degrees F. Yet a sudden, localized frost began to crawl across his windshield. In the distance, rising out of the shimmering heat waves of the road, he saw it. A street lamp. A single, rusted, cast-iron street lamp from the 1920s, standing alone in the middle of the sand. Underneath it stood the figure in the yellow dress. Her back was turned. She was holding something in her hand, a scorched, vintage invitation to a grand opening dance. The road doesn't end just because you change the map, Elias, a voice whispered, not from outside, but from the speakers of his truck. The phantom highway terrified, Elias realized he hadn't escaped the end of the line. In the American supernatural lore, some spirits aren't tethered to a place, they are tethered to a soul. He shifted into gear and raced toward the horizon. But no matter how fast he drove, the street lamp appeared every mile. Mile 1, she was standing there. Mile 2, she was closer to the road. Mile 3, she was holding her hand out, gesturing for him to stop. Finally, his engine sputtered and died. The desert silence was absolute. He looked at his rearview mirror. The back of his truck was filled with a thick, gray Chicago fog that shouldn't exist in the desert. The final confrontation, the passenger door creaked open. There was no wind, yet the door swung wide as if pushed by a heavy hand. The woman stepped in. This time, her face was clear. She wasn't a monster, she was a tragedy. Tears of liquid ash ran down her translucent cheeks. "Why me?" Elias screamed, his voice cracking. "I didn't start the fire. I don't belong to your world." "Because you looked," she whispered. "In a world that ignores the forgotten, you stopped. You gave the ghost a seat. Now, you must finish the journey." She pointed to the dashboard. The GPS suddenly flickered to life. It didn't show Arizona. It showed the floor plan of a building, the Starlight Club, 1924. "The fire didn't just take our lives," she said, her voice now a chorus of dozens of voices. "It took our names. We are the unclaimed. We need someone to remember the exit." The ritual of release. Elias realized this wasn't a haunting of malice, but a haunting of unfinished business. To survive, he had to play the role of the courier one last time. "What do I have to do?" She handed him the charred invitation. "Deliver this to the hearth. Tell the world we were here." Suddenly, the desert vanished. Elias was standing in the middle of the vacant lot on 44th Street in Chicago. It was snowing. The police officer from before was nowhere to be seen. Elias walked to the center of the lot, knelt in the dirt, and buried the charred yellow fabric and the invitation. He took out his lighter and sparked a small, controlled flame over the spot. "I remember you," he said clearly. "The girl in yellow, the Starlight Club, the night of the fire. You are delivered." The morning after the temperature snapped back to normal. The fog lifted, revealing the mundane skyline of Chicago. The heavy weight on Elias' chest, the cold that had lived in his bones for months, finally evaporated. He walked to the nearest diner, his clothes smelling of old smoke. He ordered a black coffee and sat by the window. On the front page of the local newspaper, a small headline caught his eye. "Anonymous donation settles historic memorial for 1924 fire victims." Elias looked at his hands. They were stained with soot, but for the first time in a long time, they were warm. The American streets are full of shadows, but sometimes all a shadow needs is for someone to acknowledge it exists before it can finally fade into the light. Elias drove home, and for the first time, he didn't look in the rearview mirror with fear. He just drove,